Alright, so really quickly, this is me in the editing phase. I didn't show every project I did throughout the entire year because that would take forever, and this video is already long enough, so I just showed most of them. Some of them I didn't show, one because I'm gonna do a video on one of them later, probably, and a few of the other ones that I didn't show, I just didn't think were relevant, or they were really small projects, so just thought that I would include that in here. And also, the editing is pretty bad because I'm not an editor, obviously. I do music, I don't edit videos. I'll probably get better at it later on down the line, but just a couple of disclaimers before the video starts. So, yeah. So, this is my first project of the year. Well, I think this might technically be December 2019, but it was really close to the new year, so I guess I'll just count this as like my first project of the year. Um, I'm sure I probably had like one other one that was a little bit earlier than this, but this is basically the final product of that project. So let's give it a listen. Alright, so obviously it sounds pretty fucking bad. Well, not really. I'll give myself some lenience because I didn't really know what I was doing. I used bass effects on guitars, which I almost never do anymore. That was just like my new guitar amp kind of thing. I used that on pretty much everything. I think even the bass. This is the bass track, I guess. I didn't label it. I used Easy Drummer, which still is good. Still something I use sometimes now. Well, only for like certain drums, not for like the entire kit. No editing to the drums, the bass. Probably very little EQing. Yeah, not too much. I was still learning the ropes of everything, but I think I was more focused on the actual songwriting part of this, so that's why I wasn't really too worried about actually mixing it. So, as a start, this will be a good place to reference back to once I get towards the end of the video showing off like my most recent stuff. So, it'll be pretty interesting to see how this holds up against the project I did in the beginning of the year. I think maybe January or early February. This is one of the first videos I did on my channel when I first created it. This is called the Modern Metalcore Demo. You could probably go back and find it, but it's basically me doing a cover of the intro of 350, I think, by Veil of Maya, which is a pretty good song. But anyway, let's just give it a listen. Oh, hold on. So right off the bat, I can tell this is when I started learning how to mix drums because yeah, I got a ton of plugins on them. It doesn't sound like the stock Easy Drummer samples, but as you can hear, the drums sounded pretty weak just by themselves. I'll try to solo it out. Yeah, I just could not deal with that. If that was like a drum sound I had in a mix, that just sounds so weak and the kick is way too clicky in my opinion. I mean, mixing is subjective, but this is just when I was learning how to do drums, which is it's cool to see like this is the point where I started learning how to like okay, so people put plugins on different samples. I'll remember that. And the guitars I'm pretty sure is the exact same thing. I didn't really start changing up my guitar sound till like maybe in the middle of the year or something. And I also want to point out how my bass processing is sent to group tracks for some reason. I don't even know. And the drum bus is an FX channel. I have no clue why, but I mean, it was February. This is like around 2 months when have started recording. So I still had a lot to. I'm actually really excited to listen back to this again. This is called Kinda Gent. This is when I was just going for like a super gritty, saturated, distorted, basically, I don't know, deathcore track sound. I don't know. This is something original I did, so it's finally not a cover of a song, but this is February again, I think. I don't know. Let's just take a listen. I have no clue where the left guitar is. It says it's playing. I don't know. I probably fucked something up in the routing. I'm pretty sure there's a huge breakdown here, so let's just listen to that. This is absolutely terrible. I don't know what went wrong with the guitars. I'm pretty sure, I don't know. Holy shit, I have so many plugins. Yeah, I really don't know what's going on with the guitars, but the bass tone is so brutal. It's almost too brutal. Let me solo out the bass. Should be it. I was on the pursuit of a brutal bass tone. I just could not figure out how to get a brutal bass tone. And I think this is when I was starting to figure out my bass tone. So we'll just mark this project down as like the moment I started really learning how to come up with a good bass tone to use in a mix that's like super gritty and brutal. So I was really happy when I got this bass tone. I was just trying so hard to learn the different methods of bass and like watching YouTube videos, and I think my main problem was I wasn't EQing it correctly. So if I take a look at this EQ, yeah, I just destroyed the mids, which was basically what I was missing, because in a lot of modern metal bass tones, the upper mids are just gone. It's just super sub, low mids, and then the clank in the high end. So yeah, so anyway, on to all right. So I think that this project was featured in a deathcore, death metal. I can't remember what I titled it, but it's on my channel somewhere. And I remember I got some bad ratings on it. I think just because, if I remember correctly, it just sounded horrible. So we'll see how bad it sounds. That snare is just terrible. I was trying to go for like a thrashy old death metal snare, but I don't know. It was horrible. There's not much to say about this other than it's just terrible. I can see why people didn't. Alright, so I think we're at end of February now with this project. This is a cover of Part of Something by Ocean's 8 Alaska. I included it in a video that actually did pretty well on my channel. Can't remember how many views it got, but I was just focused on the guitars. But what'd I just do? So I don't know. Let's just give it a listen. Yeah, so right off the bat, I can tell this is when I was starting to learn a little bit more about how to mix drums. I started learning that you should be taking mids out, which I think the EQing, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. So at least now I have a little bit of an idea, but the drums sounded super sucked out from what I can hear. Let me just solo it. Yeah, I think the EQing I probably would do a little bit differently now, but the guitars, I actually am not using Bias anymore. I was using Guilty Pleasure by Joey Sturgis, which is a really good plugin, and I think this is where I started using Joey Sturgis plugins more for guitars instead of Bias. So let me just... Yeah, so guitars sound pretty crunchy. I got a compressor on them. I wouldn't do that nowadays, but it's pretty cool to just look back and see how far I came with just basic habits of mixing when I'm doing certain instruments and stuff. So it's cool to see that, and I also want to listen to this bass really quick. Alright, so the bass isn't even that bad, honestly. It's missing a little bit of I can't describe it. It's not bad. I still would use that, but maybe a little bit differently, I guess. If I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure I did this in around mid-March or later March. I can't remember exactly, but this is basically when the whole lockdown pandemic thing began, and I took a break from making videos, I remember, but I was still doing projects and stuff and like trying to mix and just music in general. So I just didn't post any of it, but this is a cover of You Call That a Knife. This is a Knife by Capture the Crown. I think they go by Capture now, but anyway, let's just I don't think this is that bad, and I remember I isolated the vocals in Audacity just to like include it in the project. I don't know. By the way, just want to point out really quick, the exclamation marks with the Molat or any plugins are basically plugins that are not compatible anymore because I updated my Mac OS and I guess they just don't work with it anymore. So I don't even use them anymore anyway. But back to the song. Alright, so if this is alright, this is still Easy Drummer, but I was definitely getting better at mixing drums. I feel like as I kept going, I just started getting better and better at mixing drums, mostly just because I just was watching more and more YouTube videos and I'm just trying to emulate the sounds I hear in there with like EQing and stuff. And this honestly isn't even that bad. It's just I don't think I did a lot of mastering on it. Yeah, it's just got a compressor on it, which GDR Kotel Nekev is or Kov is a really good compressor for mastering. But yeah, the guitar tone, not too bad. Obviously needs more EQing and just other stuff, but I was definitely getting better at doing drums too. Let me just hear the drums. Super pumpy. I probably wouldn't do that much compressing on the just overall drum sound. I was just trying to get the kick to sound super huge and thick, which I definitely got that achieved because you can hear it's just pounding the mix. But yeah, so at this point we're in March, so we'll continue. Alright, so taking a break from doing the covers, this is a song I wrote and tried to record in I think around April or somewhere in that time frame, March or April. And the riffs I remember weren't even that bad. Like the songwriting aspect was pretty good, and I think I lost motivation. Yeah, I didn't ever finish it. And all these cuts on the guitars and stuff, I was learning like editing guitars and stuff, and how I was just like, man, I'm terrible at playing on time. So I just started editing everything, which obviously you shouldn't edit like everything, like breakdowns and palm mutes over like stuff that has to be tight. I would understand, but like just complete riffs, it just like play it right on the first time, you know. So I don't know. Let's just listen. That riff right there, I've had written for so long. I just never got to use it, so I was glad I was finally able to put it into a song. But as 99% of music goes, it just people lose motivation and just never finish it. But I think there's also a really good riff in here too that I wrote. Yeah, the bass obviously was a little bit too heavy, but that was really good with like a songwriting aspect. Now, as far as mixing goes, it's missing a lot of harmonics and just different areas of EQing that should be in the mix. Let's see how I'm doing on bass at this point. I was probably really proud of that bass tone. That's something I really sought after back then. Well, I say that like it was a long time ago. I don't know. It's just cool to see my bass tone progression because that's something I struggled a lot with. And also one more thing that's worth noting, I'm pretty sure I am not using Easy Drummer on these drums. It's the free drum sampler that you get if you subscribe to Ultimate Recording. I don't know. That Joey Sturgis mixing school thing, the online thing. But yeah, so drums definitely improved. Guitars still using Joey Sturgis. Bass tones improving. Started using some MIDI effects, and yeah, bro, I'm really excited about this one. So this was April, I think. I was doing a cover of a like a C minor backing track I found on YouTube, and I was listening to it just randomly one day. I was like, this is actually really good. So I did a cover of it, and I'm using the Ultimate Drum Production sampler, that free sampler thing I was talking about from Joey Sturgis' mixing school. And guitars, see Guilty Pleasure, and bass is probably still bias. No, okay, I was using the TSE BOD, which is basically a Sans amp. So let's just give it a listen. All right, so that song is really good. It's got like this melodic, or I don't know how to put it. It makes me feel some type of way. You know how like some songs do that to you? I think it's the rhythm guitars that just, I don't know. But this isn't about the songwriting. This is about the mixing. So drums definitely a huge improvement when I started using this because the drums just sound really good right out of the box. Bass tone, always gotta check that. All right, that I don't know what went wrong with that. There's like no actual bass in it. I was just focused on clink. Um, Rhythm guitars probably sound the same. I'm not gonna go into those, but yeah. So I was starting to get better with like just. I think this is when I was starting to more focus on drums, and like the whole spring season. I was really focused on trying to get a really good drum sound, which is why the kicks also sound super pumpy, which just sounds good. Okay. Sounds good, but it doesn't fit well in a mix. Demons with Ryu by Emir. This was another big project, as you can see, that I was really proud of. As you can see, I did a lot of effects on here. I downloaded these stems on some, I think, I can't remember how I downloaded them, but these are not stems that, or the drums at least, I didn't actually program, but I did mix them, and I played the guitar and the bass. So I just basically used the MIDI programming because I didn't feel like programming the drums. So yeah, this is also on my channel. I think I should add that too. I'll just listen to a small section. So I think I messed up with the EQing on pretty much everything. I put way too much high end and presence into it that it almost makes me feel sick to listen to. And I remember when I was actually mixing this, I was trying to reference the actual song. As you can see, I got the reference track up here, and the guitars are super high gain because that's just how Joey Sturgis was doing guitars in like 2011. And I was trying to go for that tone, but I didn't know how to, so I basically fucked everything up, and the guitars are just super ear rape if you listen. Yeah, it's just too much high end, but I think I did the same thing with the bass. But this is a another breakthrough project because I was starting to learn a lot more about like effects and stuff and how to do like reverse cymbals and bombs and like snare reverb dumps and all that kind of stuff. So that was really cool, and I had a lot of fun doing this project. This is a cover of "Pray for Plagues" by Bring Me the Horizon. Um, Pretty much the only thing worth noting about this project, which I did in September, or I think something like that. I'm not using the Ultimate Drum Production sampler anymore. I actually went ahead and bought DrumForge, and I used those samples. And as you can see, I bounced them out of like an actual project into WAV file or .wav. I don't know how you pronounce it, files, and I just mixed it from there. So oh yeah, I got the vocal track in here somewhere. There it is. Yeah, so it's not too bad. It's just I think the main thing I was focusing on here was like getting familiar with using DrumForge as my drums now, and I was starting to get a little bit more familiar with like basic habits to have when going about mixing drums. There's a cover of "Children of Cybertron" by Emir, using Drum Forge for drums, probably using Guilty Pleasure for guitars. Nah, I used Menace, alright. And I can't remember anything really significant about this project other than I did way too much bass. Let me just go to a certain part so I can show you. Yeah, the drums don't sound bad. They're actually pretty good. Same with the guitars. This wasn't too long ago, so yeah, but I don't know. I was still trying to go for the Joey Sturgis sound, and I just wasn't really able to nail it, and I'm still not able to nail it. He's just one of a kind, so I was really trying to figure out what he was doing, but he's the one who's got decades of experience, and I'm the only one, and I'm the one with only like a few months, so there's gonna be a huge difference. So now we're in, I think, November, late November. I downloaded these stems completely off the Tight Sound Records website. They have some stems up there. They're really good and really cool, so you should go check them out. But I didn't play anything on here. I was just really focused on mixing. And I can't remember if I... Yeah, so, the drums, I resampled, I think, the snare. I'm not going to say anything for sure because I don't quite remember, but I was also really proud of this one when I got it finished. Yeah, so one thing I would change though, listening back, is turn the guitars up. The bass tone is actually really good. I'm really proud of that. I'm probably gonna have to go back and copy some of the settings down. But yeah, let me just solo out this bass. It sounds to me like the guy whoever made these stems from Tight Sound was using Trillion. I don't know for sure, but that's just kind of what it sounds like for the Trillion hardcore finger style or whatever it's called. I don't know. All right, cool. So this is a full cover of Those in Glass Houses by Of Mice and Men. I didn't post this video. This was November. I didn't really post a lot, to be honest, throughout the entire year compared to like the amount of projects I did, because I don't know why. I guess I just didn't have the motivation to put into a video. But one of the only relevant things about this project is I bought Loki bass too, and that was because my strings on my bass were starting to get super old. Like I hadn't changed them in like months, and I just couldn't get like a super good sound out of it. Like it sounds good, I just couldn't get like that good sound out of it. So I'm just gonna focus on the bass really quick. The Loki bass. I'm pretty sure I'm just using a preset with this. Yeah, so they sampled a Dingwall. I don't know. I'm obviously not like sponsored by them, but it's just cool how I originally had a recorded bass in here, and then I A-B'd it with programmed bass after I programmed it, and the difference was like night and day. It sounded so much better. Pretty sure also for the drums I'm using different samples. I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, okay, so this is basically like a custom kit I made with a bunch of different samples from drum virtual instruments. I have this, I'm pretty sure it's an Easy Drummer kick. And I bought this snare pack from Tight Sound Records. Sounds really cool, and the cymbals I'm pretty sure are all Drum Forge, so I like combined them into the Cubase sampler whatever thing and just used it, and it sounds pretty good. Yeah, not really too sure how I feel about the whole project. It sounded good, and now I just kind of lost its spark for me, I guess is the only way to put it. And the only relevant thing about this project here is it's called Amp Test. So believe it or not, I was using digital products and amps the entire year. I have a 6505 in my house, in my room, And I used to play with that a lot, but I stopped using it because I was using plugins, and I just figured why not try to plug that into my interface and then record something with that. So I'm just gonna solo it out because I was just messing around with all my amps here. As you can see, there's so many amps, and so this is just what the 6505 and the drums sound like. This is also an original song, or not a song, well, I don't know, it's just something I had in mind that I always like kind of randomly riff around with. One big thing I really want to point out here is that I started buying more and more plugins. I kind of didn't really go over that in the whole video, but the API 550B is probably my favorite plugin of all time for guitars. It really brings them to life once you start using it correctly, and I don't know, it's just so good. And I also paired these guitars, the 6505 ones, with the Ignite Emissary amp, which I'm sure you probably heard of. It's really good, and when you combine them, it sounds even better. It kind of gives the 6505 a lot more body into it, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. It sounded pretty good. I didn't really want to like go overboard on it because I was just testing out the 6505 program bass. I started programming bass. I don't know if I mentioned that yet, but yeah, I usually like to record bass, but for some instances I'll use the program bass. Yeah, you know program. And now we're finally up to date. So this I did like literally like 3 or 4 days ago. I was working on it this week. This is a cover of American Terrorist by Deception of a Ghost. These guys didn't really get big. I'm pretty sure they also broke up, but they're from North Carolina, which is where I'm from, and I always liked this song. I don't know. It didn't get popular at all, but it was a pretty good song. I wish it would have gotten the attention it deserved. So I'll just skip ahead. I'm really proud of how everything in here turned out. I finally got my drums to sound like crazy, almost like a Cameron Mizell drum track. If you know him, he produced like Memphis May Fire, early IC Stars. You just look him up. But I'm starting to draw more inspiration from him now than Joey Sturgis because I just like how his mixes sound like. People say they sound like super processed, but I really like how it sounds. It's not super like raw. It sounds like extremely polished, but in a good way. I don't know. So I'm gonna solo out these drums really quick and just show off how they sound. Let me go to that breakdown again. And for the guitars, I am using Menace. Yeah. So I finally got a new interface. I was using a crappy Behringer one that was like $30, and I'm using now a Scarlett 2i2 3rd Gen. Finally got a better interface, and it really does make my guitars sound a lot better and cleaner. And I was using Menace on these guitars with a custom cab. I was using a Catharsis IR, which is a free IR pack. You should definitely download it. And I'm using the S Press 8 cab, I think, which is it's sampled from a Mesa cab, and everyone was saying that it's the exact same cab that Cameron Mizell was using in a lot of his records. So I was really trying to go for his guitar tone, as you can hear. Has a lot of that mid-range crunch, and it's not super dynamic, and I cut a ton of the high end off, which I think was one of the main things I was doing wrong with guitars, not putting a low pass filter, high pass filter. I wasn't really doing the EQ all that right, And I actually recorded this bass with a real bass. I was gonna program it, but I got new bass strings finally. And I know changing strings is important. Obviously, I've been playing guitar for 5 years, but I didn't really know how important it was to change bass strings like even more often than guitar strings, because the bass strings just lose their natural clank, which is that sound that everyone's going after for metal music. And the new bass strings just you just have to have new bass strings when you record. This is how it sounds. I was doing this with the Cameron Mazel Chango Studios sound in mind. The bass tone is it's not exactly like his. I'm still trying to figure out how to get my bass tone to sound similar to his, but it has a lot of that grind sound, which is what he uses. So I was referencing him in this project, obviously, for most of it, and I'm actually pretty proud with how it turned out. Starting to do more and more mastering. Let me turn off the mastering plugins. I'm obviously not that good at mastering, but I'm starting to get better. And yeah, this is pretty much where I am now. I'm gonna keep doing mixing. Obviously, it's really fun. I'm really interested in it, and hopefully I can get better and better. I think from the beginning of this video, the first project I did compared to now, there's a huge night and day difference, but still a lot more I need to do and learn how to do and just perfect my sound and go just keep learning and learning. And I don't know, maybe I'll do another one of these at the end of next year. So if you like the video, leave a like, and subscribe, share it, I guess. I don't know, do. But just um mhm.